Welcome to My Turn Podcast, a gaming podcast hosted by extra competitive siblings, where we have news, reviews, laughs, and arguments about games across all genres and formats. My name's Jem, and I am joined today by my littlest sibling, Erin.
Hi.
And my brother from another mother, Tim.
Howdy ho.
And on top of that, we are joined by extra special guests, the Horror Hangout Podcast. Say hi, Luke.
Hello.
And hello, Ben.
Hello.
Thanks for joining us on My Turn Podcast, guys.
No worries. Glad to be here.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
And we've got you on for a very, very special reason. We've done a little podcast crossover. So we've been on your podcast already talking about a classic film from 2005. What was that film, guys?
Classic film? Doom. We did Doom.
Yeah, we chatted through Doom because it is a film based on a video game. And today you're on our podcast and we're going to talk about a video game. Want to tell us what it is, Ben?
So we're going to talk about Resident Evil Village, or Resident Evil 8, because it's got the Roman numerals of the 8 in the title Village.
Oh my God,
that's literally
yes, it
ingenious.
has. I actually hadn't noticed that. Fun fact at the top there. Yeah, so this whole episode is going to be about Resident Evil, specifically about Resident Evil Village. We are also going to talk about some of the lore that elements of the game are based on. And we're just going to chat through the whole thing. But before we do, I'd love to hear from Ben and Luke a little bit about yourselves and about the podcast. So what we always do at My Turn Podcast is we always start by asking you to describe the thing that we're going to talk about in a nutshell. So if one of you or both of you could, what is Horror Hangout in a nutshell?
Oh God, that is a good question. What do you reckon, Luke?
Horror Hangout is we started out, it's a horror movie review podcast. We took the Empire magazine's top 50 horror films of all time. And every week we'd work our way through the list and review them. And then we finished that and then we just didn't really stop. So now we just review any old horror movie. New, old.
Doom.
Yeah. It's grown into a bit of a monster, isn't it? Well, I think we've got 180 episodes down. We have various guests every single week, so it's pretty exciting. We're meeting a lot of interesting people, talking about a lot of interesting films, and having a lot of fun along the way.
Yeah. And then also it'd be really nice to hear about yourselves individually in a nutshell as well, because you both do really cool creative stuff as well. So let's start with you, Luke. Luke, who are you in a nutshell?
My name is Luke Kondor. That's Kondor spelled with K, Kondor. I make strange stuff, make scary stuff, make funny stuff. If you like podcasts, if you listen to this, go check out our podcast, The Other Stories, which is a weekly short story podcast. It's kind of like Black Mirror-esque, I guess, those kind of stories. And we have been doing it for 5 years now. We're on 8 million downloads. We sold the film and TV option a while ago. So it's done really well. It's kind of our pet project, I guess. It's Go check it out.
Amazing.
It's our baby.
It's your baby. So you do that together, yeah.
Yeah, there's loads of us who do it now, don't there? It started off as just 4 of us writing stories and publishing them as short fiction every Monday in podcast form, and now it's absolutely loads of people involved: writers, narrators, editors.
I think there's about 30 people now.
Wow.
All based around the world. Yeah.
Amazing. And Ben, do you have any little nut crumbs that you want to add to your side of the you in a nutshell?
do I have nut crumbs? I'll sprinkle some of my nut crumbs.
Wait. Sprinkles. That's what I'm going for.
Nut sprinkles. So I guess I'll just describe myself in a nutshell. How would I describe myself? So I'm a writer, podcaster, graphic designer, horror fan / aficionado, I'd say. I'm an avid gamer. I'm a collector of game stuff as well, mainly all things PlayStation. Relevant. I'm a huge Resident Evil fan. And by that, I mean, I like the games a lot. Not that I'm 7 foot tall, because I'm yeah, that's me, I guess. Nut crumbs.
No, I'm sorry. Sometimes my brain doesn't work, you guys. It can get interesting when I talk sometimes. Yeah, but great. Okay, that's a nice place to segue into the subject of the day, Resident Evil. So, talk to us about your relationship with the series before this game. So, I think Ben, like you've touched on it, you're quite a big fan.
I'm quite a big fan, yes. I would say it's my number one favorite game and franchise, and it always has been since I played the first one in 1996. I went into the Virgin Megastore to pick up Resident Evil 1, and I took a friend with me who was slightly taller because it was 15 rated, and I was what was I, 11? So I was like, you go up to the desk and buy this game. And he was like, I don't want to. And he chickened out. So I had to go up and buy this 15 rated game on PS1, and they sold it to me. So and I've not looked back since then. It's my favorite franchise. I've bought every game. It's one of the only gaming franchises where I would buy the game on release day. I don't tend to do that with much. It tends to be Resident Evil, really make an event of that. I think I've played every single game. And it's sort of shaped my love for horror as well, because my love for horror movies has kind of like gone alongside that. And I think it is from playing stuff like Resident Evil from such a young age and sort of gravitating towards the genre.
I'm surprised that you could play that at 11, but I was too scared when I was that young to play Resident Evil. I could be traumatized by like films and stuff. Fine, no problem. But Resident Evil definitely was so scary.
Always had to play it in the day. Couldn't play it at nighttime ever. Always had to have a friend or family member sitting and watching. I used to say it was watching me. Watch me. This game's great, but really, I just was there. I needed the moral support.
You just needed someone whose hand you could touch if you got too scared.
Exactly. So, could I touch your hand, please? Could I hold your hand while I play? Yeah,
quick! I've got nut crumbs.
Could I sprinkle my nut crumbs? Don't. And I feel like my experience with the game is sort of that's followed through. I followed through all the way to like this version. Because even with this version, I needed my girlfriend to like be in the same room with me and watch me play certain parts of this game. And I sort of passed it off as because I don't want you to miss anything. Like I feel like something really exciting is going to happen. But really, I just needed someone there to bounce off of and have that moral support. And there's something I love. There's something about that has kind of transcended into horror movies as well. Like I love experiencing horror games and horror movies with somebody else and seeing their reaction, and especially if they react and they're more scared than me. Yeah. I chalk that off as a win. You're scared of that? Grow up.
When secretly you're like,
oh God, I'm absolutely terrified right now.
And what about you, Luke? What's your sort of background with the Resident Evil games?
So like I said, I was too scared. My cousin had Resident Evil 1, and I used to watch him play a little bit. Maybe he needed me for moral support. I'm not too sure. But I just couldn't do it. It's just too scary. And then I think Resident Evil 4 for the GameCube, Resident Evil 4 is more of an action game. It's not as scary. So that was kind of my entryway into the franchise. And then quite recently, I really love Resident Evil 4. Quite recently, I played Resident Evil 7, maybe a couple of years ago. And that was terrifying. But I managed to kind of push my way through. And it was such an achievement that I put it on my CV now. That I played Resident Evil 7. I'm just so proud of myself for getting through some of those scary bits. And Resident Evil 8 has some scary bits, but Resident Evil 7 was next level.
Yeah, as someone who didn't play it but watched my partner play it in order to confirm that I definitely wasn't going to play it, I completely relate to that. So I know Tim and I haven't really played any before, apart from like I had a dip in with Resident Evil 1. I'm a bit older than you guys, so I was about the right age to play it when it came out, or maybe thereabouts. But I didn't have a PlayStation, so it was always like a friend's older brother had it, so we'd play it a little bit. Have you played any before, Eric?
Like a similar kind of thing with you, like around the friend's house, but again, I was too shit scared as well. I find games are just so immersive, especially horror ones. Like I'm fine with horror films, but oh my God, I was saying to you guys earlier, I played Five Nights at Freddy's the other day, and I just couldn't get past the first stage. I just didn't want to play anymore. Yeah, so no, my involvement with Resident Evil, I've not really played it before, but
yeah, and I don't think, I mean, I know for myself, I kind of avoid horror games, even though I love horror films. That I don't think there's a film that I'm scared of that I can think of. Maybe Event Horizon, but I was quite young when I watched it. But my memory of that is really quite disturbed. Like, I'm like, oh, it gave me nightmares. But like, I'd watch any horror film. But the games, I think, is like, what Erin's touched on, that immersiveness.
It's because like you have to press, like there's a dark room and you hear a noise on the other side of it, and you have to press forward. Like you have to make that, and then if you go the slower you go, the more difficult. If you go, I'll just creep around, you're never going to do it. So you just have to kind of sellotape the forward button down, and just keep yourself going. It's the only way you can do it.
I literally felt like that playing this as well. But I think like the reason I was interested in playing this, well, you guys suggested it, but I'd already thought about it because this game, it just is packaged in a different way. So before we start talking about Resident Evil Village, because you two are more rehearsed in the way the games have evolved, what are the different, because some of them were first person and some of them weren't, is that right, the older ones?
So
they've kind of changed quite a lot over the years.
That's what's amazing about this franchise, is that it has evolved so much, and it had a slight dip in quality around about 5 and 6. I think that's kind of the general consensus, is that there was a slight dip in quality, but apart from that, it's kind of been consistent. Even like the spin-off games and the sort of side mission games have all sort of been received really well. So obviously the first 3 were the fixed camera angles, tank controls. Number 4 went for the over-the-shoulder tank controls. Went for the number 4 was like over-the-shoulder, far more action orientated, and that was how 5 and 6 kind of worked out. And then 7 went for first person, and I remember sort of finding out it was going first person. I was a bit like, oh no, oh god, really? Like, it doesn't feel like Resident Evil to me, but it's managed to reinvent itself so many times. It's like Madonna, this game franchise. It's just reinvented itself so many times, and always been good. And when 7 was one of probably the most popular games in the franchise, and now obviously into 8, they're not afraid to take things that work well and just apply them to completely different settings. Like the fact that this game is sort of full on gothic horror, and we've seen little sprinklings of that before in the franchise, but never full. We've never seen werewolves really in the franchise before, or vampires and stuff. The fact that they can add that to the franchise and it kind of fits, it just feels right. It feels, even though it doesn't. I was saying to Luke before that Resident Evil Village feels like a sequel to Resident Evil 7. It's like a spiritual sequel, but really there's a hell of a lot different. It's a completely different experience, and I feel like that happens with every single installment of the main franchise, every single numbered installment at least.
Oh, that's good to know. Yeah, because I remember when my partner was playing 7, he was like, this is the first time I've really wanted to play Resident Evil. I think he went back and did the redone 2, which is in the police station, right? And he enjoyed that as well. But it's just a different game because there was more exploration and puzzling as well as the horror. So it's really interesting that you're saying they've constantly reinvented it the whole time. Nice.
Cool.
All right. Well, I think we're ready to start talking about the game, Resident Evil Village. We're going to do a spoiler-free chat through this, but obviously there are certain things like characters and key plot points that aren't like spoilers, but we need to mention. So if you don't want to know anything about the game at all, just turn off now. But we'll try and be as spoiler free for all the good bits as we can. I'm going to hand the reins over to Tim.
I think it's wise. Should I take over question duties? Because I've played it the least. I mean, first of all, I'm definitely looking forward to Resident Evil's Kabbalah phase. I think that will be interesting. According to your prediction, that it's following Madonna's career path.
That's a Madonna reference. Erin was really confused. That's a Madonna reference.
Okay. Madonna is a singer who... All right. So hands up, I've only played about half an hour of it. So beyond the obvious that I think it's got something to do with, zombies or diseases or something. Explain to me, what is this game in a nutshell?
Well, so it's weird because it's sort of a sequel to 7. You take control of Ethan Winters, the character from number 7, who'd been through this horrendous event in number 7. He managed to save his wife, Mia. So now we're many years later on down the line. We're living in Europe for some reason. It doesn't ever say where in Europe. It just says Europe. Imagine Romania or somewhere like that. Yeah. And then he's got a baby on the way called Rose. No, a baby already out. She's already arrived.
Oh God, that was quick.
Yeah. And then they're attacked by some military people, and the baby's stolen. Mia, this is all in the first. I don't know.
Yeah. Totally spoil this bit. That's fine. It's like the intro.
Yeah. And then Ethan is taken by Chris Redfield, who's a big character in the franchise. He's a hero from previous entries. And then it's all a bit confusing because we're in a van, and then the van crashes for some reason, but not in modern day Europe, it seems, in a sort of Transylvanian looking little European village full of people in homemade clothes. I don't know how they make those clothes actually, but you don't buy them from the shops.
Right,
yeah. So in terms of like the type of game it is a first person horror, which also has a lot of adventure aspects to it, which I didn't expect. So there's a lot of exploration and adventure. And as you said, Ben, it's like a very gothic horror in feel.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, I mean, it keeps the traditional survival horror elements of the game. It kind of takes a lot of the survival horror stuff that it returned to in 7, because, as I said, 5 and 6, bit of a dip in quality. It was very, very action orientated. So in 7, they went back to the survival horror roots, and it seems like this one, for at least the first half of the game, I'd say, is very much the same, but just a different type of horror, whereas 7's like terrifying redneck, where are they? Louisiana, that's right.
Yeah, Louisiana.
Yeah. And this one's just like full on over the top camp gothic horror with vampires, werewolves, just like a creepy village full of residents.
I'll be honest, that was putting me off a little bit at first, because I really enjoyed 7. I wanted more of that kind of really gritty horror stuff. That'd be quite another entry for the CV. But like the campy horror stuff, I don't know, I wasn't feeling it, but when I started to play it, I really got into it.
I think
quite
that's the thing.
Endearing.
Resident Evil seems to be so good at just involving all of these elements that on the surface seem like they're not at home in the franchise, but then as soon as you experience them, you're like, well, that's just totally Resident Evil. That's exactly it. And I think that's what's so good about it. But yeah, it does lean into the action stuff later on in the game. So it feels like, in terms of like the vibes and the atmosphere, it's very Resident Evil 4, walking into this sort of situation, this sort of like in this foreign land. We have no idea what the nature of the threat is, and it's like a mystery that kind of unravels throughout your time playing it. So it feels like Resident Evil 4, but in terms of the gameplay, it's very much like Resident Evil 7, but with more action.
So where you touched on the gameplay being more about survival, were some of the earlier ones that you clearly don't like as much, which were action heavy? Was it like not resource sparse?
No.
This game and the last one is quite resource sparse. Certainly this one early on is resource sparse. So you've got to be, you're constantly like looking for the next round of bullets.
Early on, definitely. I mean, that was kind of one of the things that made Resident Evil what it was. The fact that it was resource sparse, you had to kind of like really manage your inventory. You had like 6 inventory slots in the first game. If you were Chris Redfield, if you were Jill, I think you had 8, I believe. And in item boxes as well, dropping keys and other puzzle items in the item box and having to backtrack and return to it and do all that stuff. And it just felt like as the games went on, they were like, actually, no, here's a rocket launcher. 1 hour into the game, here's a grenade launcher with unlimited grenades. And it just felt like you never ever felt like that threat could actually was actually a problem. It felt like you could deal with any threat that was sort of thrown your way. Whereas with 7 and in a way this game, you see a certain threat, you see a certain enemy type, and you're like, what the hell am I going to do to kill this dude? Like I've not got enough bullets, I've not got enough health, and it's that sort of fear that I think. And it's difficult with modern games because obviously in terms of checkpoints and save spots, they're quite regular, and you know, if you die, you've only got to go back a couple of minutes, so that kind of takes away that edge of being worried about dying and having to retrace your steps all over again. In a way, I just think with modern games there's not really much you can do about that because that's just the way they are, and if they were another way, everyone would hate them and be frustrated, wouldn't they?
Well, I mean, there's the obvious games that don't have that. So like, Dark Souls, and even like the new Hades. I don't know if you've played Hades. Like that's similar. You know, you're kind of having to redo stuff all the time. But I take your point that it does take some of the horror off. So then they're having to reinvent and reinvest in the atmospherics and in things like the active danger in the gameplay, which I think is what they've done here. Yeah.
Tell me a bit more about sort of your expectations going into the game, maybe how they were either borne out or you found out they weren't true. So you said, you know, the kind of camp aesthetic of it, and it's had a huge marketing push. Like I feel I know a lot about this game before I even came to it. So did that affect your gameplay? Did it, you know, has what was put out there come to pass, or actually is the gameplay turned out to be a bit different to what you thought?
The gameplay is pretty much exactly what I thought it would be. The thing that surprised me the most is they have put a load of marketing out. I think Lady D, the giant vampire lady, she's gone a bit viral. So she's all over the internet at the minute. And when you go into this game, you think that it's an ice cream van.
You're being heckled by an ice cream van. It's great. We've got the window open because there's 3 of us in a tiny room. Yeah. But I mean,
it's quite spooky though.
Yeah,
you could put like a little effect over it, maybe slow it down at this point. Sorry, continue.
There is actually a misplaced jewelry box in this as well. Of course there is.
So I was quite surprised by how much more there is. Like that's like the castle stuff, without spoiling it, you do get through that quite quickly. And then you move on to, when I saw that the designer of the game, the director, said he wanted the game to be like an amusement park of horror. And that makes so much sense. So you've got like a central hub, and you've got a guy who is kind of your guide, I guess, you kind of the shopkeeper guy. And then you've got different places you go to. The castle is only like, that's like going to Alton Towers, like the castle there.
Yeah.
And then there's another bit which is like going to the most terrifying escape room that you'll ever go to. There's one bit that's so scary. And then I haven't finished the end, but I'm in a completely new area that I didn't even know was there. It's I guess
there's like 4 areas, 4 main areas, and then the village, which does function like a hub. And that's so interesting. You said it is like a theme park because the Duke, who's kind of your semi-guide, semi-shop, semi.
He cooks food for you.
He literally cooks food for you. He's selling you crap you don't need sometimes and food. Yeah. So it is like a theme park.
I felt like I didn't trust him from the get-go. I was a bit like, I'm not so sure about you, mate.
How did you get into this other place so quick?
I mean, it was like that. Obviously, in Resident Evil 4, there was a merchant who kind of like popped up everywhere before any sort of big battle or something, and there was sort of an ongoing joke that he was always one step ahead of you. How did you get here so fast? What's your game? And you they kind of kept it a mystery. So what I quite liked about the Duke is that there was he had a little bit of a storyline. There was a little bit of history between him and what he meant to the overall story, but not enough that it kind of took over from the main story. But I did like that.
Do you know what? I think it would make a great game where you have to play a merchant and you're battling through hardships and your objective is to get to the next stage before the hero so then you can sell him shit.
Tim, you've just pitched Mother Courage, the game.
Mother Courage, the video game, that's true. Oh, that'd be great.
Brecht, if you're not aware of it.
There are enough Brecht in video games.
It's a Brecht play.
Oh, okay. Yeah. All right.
But Errington.
Right, let's go back off Brecht. That was a cul-de-sac. So let's go back to the gameplay. Tell me, is there anything that I might not know about it? I've only played the first half hour. What about the gameplay is in store that might tempt me to keep playing?
I'd say for me, just quickly, I was just really surprised by how much like exploration and puzzling there was. I did not expect that. That's just, my little bit.
Yeah, I think the puzzling, the exploration, the treasure hunting, all of that extra stuff that kind of really allowed you to stop. And there were moments in the game as well where you were allowed to just stop and take it all in. It wasn't like you're going straight to the next area or fighting the next big crazy monster or hiding from a vampire family trying to suck your blood. It was like there were times where you could just go and explore and not really involve yourself in any of the fighting or the gameplay like that, which was nice. I like that, especially with a game that looks so great as well. And it just felt like there was lots to do. And I even after playing through once, I still feel like I've probably missed some stuff.
Yeah.
So that's kind of an incentive for me to go back and play it again.
Think about how pretty it looks. The set, the design of like the castle and the village, it is unreal, unbelievably good.
It's the first thing.
So well put together.
First thing I noticed as well. We like to do a positives then negatives thing on here to get us sort of towards a rating. So let's go into the positives. From the bit I played, the first thing I said was, "Oh, this looks beautiful. It's really nice." Or from the folk kind of tale intro to then
cool.
the domesticity, and then as you say, kind of Eastern European Disneyland. So what are the? You can talk more about that, or any other positives that were the highlight for you?
Well, I mean, I'm still playing through. This is the same of all the Resident Evil games that I've played, and this is what I think is so great about them. They start out very scary, and you're in a very unfamiliar place, and there's some kind of mystery, and you constantly wonder what the hell is going on. And the thing that sort of pulls you through it and keeps you making brave decisions and going into these dark and scary places is because you really want to uncover the mystery. And as you get through and you get more powerful, the mystery only gets more enticing. So right now I'm at the point where I just can't stop playing. I think I played it for like 5 hours yesterday, and I haven't done a gaming session like that in a long time, just because it's so engrossing. That's probably I guess that's like the narrative design, that it's just very well put together, very well paced.
Yeah. Did you guys play PT, the playable teaser of what was supposed to be the Silent Hills game? Well, unfortunately got cancelled. But there was like a demo that went out, what was it, 2016 maybe, Luke, when PT came out? Yeah. And a first person, Hideo Kojima was involved, wasn't he?
Hideo Kojima, Guillermo del Toro.
Norman Reedus. Yeah, so it was almost like a lot of the team involved with Death Stranding before that ended up getting made. And it's kind of like it's a first person horror short game, I guess, short playable teaser. That's what the PT stands for. And you just go through this corridor over and over again, and there are various different elements and different mysteries to solve and items to look at, and you're stalked by a horrific ghostly figure who scares the absolute crap out of you in more than one way. So it's not like when a certain scare is coming. It was horrific. But it feels like when that game got cancelled, everyone was disappointed because they were like, first-person horror game with all these amazing people involved, and it seemed terrifying. It really seems like what Resident Evil did, and I don't know if they did it, they probably didn't, but they just went, that was really popular. Let's definitely have a whole section in this game where it's basically that. It almost feels like it's a part of a different game. It does slot in nicely, but there is a certain section, without spoiling anything, where that sort of level of, when Luke said about not wanting to walk forwards into the darkness, I had that moment in Resident Evil 7, but I had it in 8 several times. Heart pounding, palms sweating. It was it was horrific. But I just feel like with those horror experiences and those horror moments, especially in gaming, once I get through them, I am just like, I feel like I'm unbeatable. Then I'm like, right now, come on then, game, show me what you got. Show me what you got next, because I've just done that. So
it makes you as the player feel pretty great when you've achieved that, and then you get all your weapons back and stuff, and you suddenly like an amazing hero, but and also the main character Ethan goes through a similar experience. This is more in 7, but at the start he's underpowered, he's overwhelmed by everything that's happening, and as you go through the game, he progresses with you. He gets more confident. He starts like swearing at the creatures and like telling them to fuck off. Or, like,
the
he's
sign
done
of
with
confidence. Swear.
Yeah, just like flipping everyone off all the time. But like he starts to get annoyed with the situation, and he's like, I just need to get my wife back or my baby back. I don't know what he's going to try and get back in the next one. But it's the parallel there between the player and the character is quite well done.
Yeah, and they've all been that like, or certainly they started like that, didn't they? And the films were as well, like a sense of it's an ordinary character in an extraordinary situation, right? Wasn't that?
Well, they were always kind of action hero stereotypes, weren't they, Ben?
Oh, were they? I thought early on they were just like normal people. If I remembered it wrong.
Early on, like the first, are we talking games or films now? Games.
So,
games, they were always like special tactics and rescue service. So they were always like super cops, essentially. But the characters were good because they were resourceful in different ways. So in the first games, you had Chris, obviously Chris, who's in this game as well. And when you start,
it's got a really nice coat. I noticed that.
A lovely coat.
Yeah.
It's a lovely coat, isn't it?
And at some point later, a turtleneck.
Oh yeah.
And I was like, "Oh, Chris, you look great! Absolutely great in a turtleneck." And he was smoking a cigarette at one point. And I thought, "Who do you think you are?" But yeah, I guess always in all 7 was the first one where you were essentially like a normal guy.
Okay.
I mean, there was like a few spin-off games like Resident Evil Survivor, which was a first-person shooter on PS1, sort of almost like Time Crisis light guns type thing. Right. Where you started off as a normal guy, but then it just turned out that you'd had amnesia and you were also a super cop. So it's kind of like that. Whereas the films went a little bit nuts with it, where they almost made Alice, like Mila Jovovich's character, like basically Neo, some sort of weird superhero, super powered, and I just don't think that ever really suited the game. And it was weird because the films and the games alongside each other started borrowing things from each other as we got into 5 and 6. So that was why I think 5 and 6 were maybe a little bit less well received, because, you know, these characters who obviously are great and really resourceful were suddenly doing backflips and flying kicks and yeah, they even made like the big bad Wesker. They even made him almost like a Mr. Smith character, where he was kind of like just moving inhuman, dodging bullets, wearing sunglasses. It all got a bit silly, and I think with Resident Evil 7 it was like a hard reset to go back to that survival horror, and by introducing a character who wasn't super powered, had never really held a gun or handled a gun, suddenly it's like unbelievable. And in 8 they kind of do hint that he's had military training, Ethan. Just a casual bit of military training on the weekend.
I completely missed that. If that was in there.
No, it's at the beginning. I heard them say that.
Just completely missed that.
So the positives are that it makes you feel like a badass, but not too much of a badass. A reasonable level of badass.
And my positive is. Oh, sorry.
I was going to say, do you want to add another positive before you mutate the conversation into a negative?
Yeah. My positive would be that I absolutely love the design of the like levels. So by that I mean each realm, because of the village was cool, but the village was not something I haven't seen before. But the actual like the 4 kind of levels that you then branch into were all just so well designed and so distinct from each other, but all having this common thread of basically feeling like a giant escape room, or one of them like a small escape room. But they had this sort of really cool level design. And in like the last one is almost a labyrinth even. So that I just found that really surprising, really cool. And also it really excited my sort of the brain that I like to use in more open world games, where I have to explore stuff to get the best out of it, was activated in this. And I was like, that just surprised me. And I thought it was a really strong move in terms of the gameplay design, because I didn't expect it.
The interior of Castle Dimitrescu is unbelievable.
Beautiful.
It's strange because, again, when I talk about the series kind of referring to older games and sort of pulling. There was when Resident Evil 4 was in development, and when they didn't make Resident Evil 4, it ended up becoming Devil May Cry. So a lot of the designs they had for that they didn't use for Resident Evil 4, but very similar to Castle Dimitrescu, where these beautiful interiors, sort of low lit, beautiful interiors, and the Gothic sort of look as well, look like that. So it was great to see. I think if you're a fan of this franchise, sometimes it's great to see certain details that perhaps you wouldn't have expected, like something like that, where you're like, oh wow, this looks just like a game that they were going to make 20 years ago. So yeah, really exciting.
And it like my partner and I were playing it at the same time, and we both said, why aren't there more first-person shooters in beautiful settings? Do you know what I mean? Like it's just so gorgeous. It just adds something else to it.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I know you go around smashing vases and stuff.
Yeah.
Priceless Ming vases.
Well, quite.
And is there anything that sucked your blood? or in general? I had to get that in, sorry. Had to do it.
I'll let you guys start, yeah.
I mean, I don't want to spoil anything, and I'm not going to, obviously, but the way the mystery unravels throughout the game, sometimes is a bit like doesn't quite make all the sense in the world, especially in terms of the actions of a certain character from the start of the game, and when you find out why this person did what they did, that feels a bit like, really, could there not have been a conversation or something? And also from a lot of the trailers we see the Umbrella logo, and there was very little from Umbrella in Resident Evil 7. So obviously Umbrella, for anyone who doesn't know, the big evil global corporation pharmaceutical company which is behind all of the bioweapons from the whole series in the films and the games. But yeah, it was very much in the background of Resident Evil 7. Sometimes it's at the forefront of these games, but with this one they seem to be like, right, so we've got the logo on some sort of plinth surrounded by other various objects, so we're going to find out the involvement of Umbrella. Yeah, just a bit disappointed in how that played out, and the way it was kind of explained, because it almost felt like we're just going to find out this and we're going to pick it up in a document and it's going to explain it there, aren't we? And that's, again, I wouldn't say it's a spoiler, but that's kind of what we get. It's almost like that didn't have to be in the game. The game would have been exactly the same game without that. So in terms of the overarching lore that connects these games to the franchise, that felt a little bit tacked on, and it could have easily done without it. I was hoping for more of a payoff, more of a reveal, but
hard agree on that. Exactly that.
In terms of stuff that sucked, I'm still playing through it right now. I'm kind of rating it quite highly. I am somewhat allergic to over campy stuff in horror. Like sometimes when, especially Ethan, it feels like he is reacting very, like something will happen, and then we, as the audience, will clock on and go, oh, that must be this, that means this, that means this. And then Ethan, about 5 seconds later, will go, oh, that means this, that means this. So it feels like he's got input lag in his brain. Like there's something wrong with Ethan.
I agree with you, but for a slightly different reason. But before I elaborate on what I think, what do you mean by overly campy horror?
Well, so the reason I love 7 so much is because it isn't campy. From the top to the bottom, like the grittiness of what's in the fridge, like there's like worms and horrible stuff sliming out of the fridge, to the way the characters talk to you, like the Baker family with the villains in that. I just loved how gritty it felt, like you were watching a 70s horror movie that was almost too close to the bone. Whereas this, when there's like when you're introduced to all the characters or the villains at the start and they're kind of dancing around you, I just think that's not scary. Like that's like a cartoon. It's too cartoonish, I think, for me. But like I said, it has kind of won me over a bit as I've been playing through it. It was just at the start I was a bit, which is one reason why I wasn't as enamored by the marketing materials. It seemed a bit cartoony. but it has won me around to some extent.
I think it's because those villain characters, they're like super villains, aren't they? And
yeah, exactly.
In Resident Evil 7, the threats were never like that. They were just essentially a normal but creepy family, and then we find out more and more about what's wrong with them and all of the different crazy, terrifying abilities they have. Whereas these guys start off as these over-the-top super villains, almost like a Justice League Dark, all revealed in front of you, all sat there sort of telling you their plan. I mean, I loved it. I was there from the start. Like, this is amazing. So I didn't really dislike that at all. But I completely understand where Luke's coming from in terms of this.
But for me, coming from somebody who loves fantasy games and like high fantasy worlds, that it relaxed me when they came out sort of showboating their plans and like flashing their powers. I was like, no, I mean, in terms of like, I knew I'd enjoy it rather than just hardcore zombies, which is why I haven't played some of the earlier ones, because I just hate zombies in horror games, especially when it's first person. It's the biting of your neck, and you can't see any of your body parts as they're being mutilated, you know. I just can't take it. So that when I was like, oh yeah, it's it's like this kind of high fantasy horror, I'm like, oh yeah, I'm going to enjoy it. Like it's okay for me.
What did you think about Ethan's hands?
Yeah, I think we can talk about this because it's right at the beginning. But the memes of Ethan's hands. Yeah,
I understand because that's the only thing we see. There's that
really early on.
I suppose I don't want to spoil a bit, but I mean, it happened in 7 as well. Yeah. Like, I know because that's all we can see on the screen, so it's like we have to show him taking damage in some way. Yeah. But like his hands, they get wrecked. Like to the point where it's like, no, you die of blood loss. But then he has like a medicine. It's like some water that he shoves over it and it kind of heals. It's really dodgy. There's
one bit where I was like, there's no way that is healing, mate, but it does. Like, and that was a stretch too far for me. That there's one, again, like wait for it, but there's just a moment where I'm like, really? You just wouldn't have hands anymore, dude. Like, I've been through so much. And also somehow his wedding ring stays on for the whole game.
Yeah, on a little stump.
And that was just like, there's no way with all the gore that is not sliding off something. But on that, so the biggest negative for me, and I don't know how you guys felt about this, is obviously I didn't play 7, but I'm aware of it. There's a little recap at the beginning, plus I watched my partner play it.
Oh, yeah.
I found Ethan's character, I guess is sort of touching on what you said, Luke. I found his character just so ridiculous in that I just didn't buy that he would say those words.
Yeah.
Like sometimes something really horrific would happen. And you meet other people who are like surviving and struggling, and something horrific might happen and they're all terrified, and just suddenly like Ethan's just had another injury to his hand, but then he's like, it's okay, I'll help you, you stay here. And I'm like, dude, look at what just happened to the whole village. Just some of the choices on his character just seem so out there compared to the rest of the writing in the game. I just didn't buy any of his reactions to anything ever.
They've given him he's coming from the angle, I guess, that he's just sick of this shit, and how is this happening to him again? Because of Resident Evil 7, he was an outsider who went into this situation and was like, holy shit, what the hell's happening? But then he sort of felt like, well, that was pretty insane, but now I've just got a normal life and a wife and a kid, and then when it's all happening again, his attitude is, rather than being terrified or backed into a corner, his attitude is literally just like, I've had enough of this shit. Why is this happening to me?
I do think it's more consistently realistic in 7. I can't stop comparing it to 7, I'm afraid. But they do feel very.
They are kind of they are related in story.
Yeah, just in 7. So his reactions, he just looks. He seems like he's found himself at the start in a sort of a slasher situation, stuck in an evil family's house. And then as the stuff gets more and more ludicrous, he seems to react in tune with it. But yeah, in this one, there's even like there's a bit where some crazy stuff happened in a house. There's a house on fire, and it started burning behind him. And he's about to jump off the roof, and he's lost half his hand. And he makes like a really over the top sort of reaction. Says "Why?" or something. He bangs his hand. He's just had it. Like he's missing half of it. It's like banging it against the wall. What are you? It's not normal, mate.
Yeah, like just pulling levers after he's got a serious hand injury and stuff, and you're like, I can't even buy that you could hold a gun. Like, I just don't.
There's obviously a moment, again, not going to spoil this.
Exactly.
There's no coming back from that. There's literally no coming back from that. What does this mean going forwards in terms of the game? And then it's like just kind of brushed over, isn't it?
Yeah, because I thought when it happens, I was like, oh, cool, right, there's going to be some really interesting game mechanic by which he can still progress in the game. And then it's like, no, I'm done.
Yeah.
It's just so weird.
Oh, he's some kind of mutant or something. Why has he got that mutant power to heal his hand? Yeah, it's unbelievable. And I mean, I'll never forget it, so I guess that's a good thing.
Yeah, right. But I mean, yeah, if you played the game, or even if you haven't and you don't care, like look up some of the Ethan Hand memes. They're pretty funny.
So that's our first recommendation for this summary, is go and look up Ethan Hand memes on YouTube. Yeah. As we start moving towards other recommendations, then who would we recommend this game for? Who is the audience? Is it the regular audience? Is it going to maybe rope in some new people? Is there anything else we need to know to find the right audience for this game?
So obviously Resident Evil fans are going to be loving this stuff, but obviously mentioning the high fantasy things as well. I think it would apply to fans of that as well, more so than any of the other games. I mean, as I said, four had a lot of similarities in terms of the cast of villains were very over the top. It was a very similar setting, very similar place. So I mean, if you liked Resident Evil Village and you haven't played 4, definitely go and get 4, because I think you're definitely going to love that. And it is available. It's been on like every platform since it was released. I think it's on PS4 as well, like the HD remasters. So yeah, definitely go and play that. But yeah,
I think it's for anyone. Weirdly, like it's
including children.
I mean more so than Resident Evil 1.
I've actually shown it to my nephews. I really shouldn't have done that, but I just thought they'll be all right with this. And we experienced a jump scare together. And I'm hoping that jump scare is going to stay with them the same way that the very first Resident Evil jump scare stayed with me, which was in the first game, walking into a corridor and some Cerberus dogs came smashing through the window. And I think I threw the controller up in the air. And, I don't tend to do that very much anymore. But there was a jump scare for this one, which really, really got me. And my nephews, we all kind of like almost did a backwards roll at the same time. Me and my 2 nephews, we kind of went, shit. Well, I said shit. One of them might have said shit.
And they said sugar.
They said sugar.
What is the age rating on this? Because we're adults. I never look. But is it 15? Must be 15.
I don't know. It's quite gory.
It might be 18. I
There's
purposely showed them the game when we were in the village section, and there wasn't seemed to be any threat. And I thought there was nothing around, but unfortunately, some lichens popped up.
Yeah, let's see. Oh, I know the bit. Yeah.
Yeah. A particular moment when you're looking through a window.
Scares, man. Oh yeah.
That was a good bit.
Jesus.
Fuck that bit in the face.
I was not expecting that.
It's a nice little switcheroo, that, because it had you looking 16. For a certain something.
16.
This is what I've said before. So I've said to Luke before that I don't really like jump scares. Cheap jump scares are like the bane of my life. I hate them, especially when accompanied with a super loud moment or a squeal of like violins. I'm just like, oh, for fuck. If you're watching a Disney Pixar film and there was a loud noise, you jump. So when it's in horror, I hate it. But with this one, I felt like it was earned because you're exploring somewhere, you found something that was telling you to look somewhere else, and you were in an environment where you're thinking, there's no threats around. This is just a nice explorative moment. And then you looked in a particular area and you got that jump scare. It felt earned. So I was angry at the game, but at the same time, I was like, I applaud you for that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's jump scares are like the reason I just don't play these kinds of games, because it just affects me a lot. I've shared some videos with you guys of me playing this game. Like, I try and move my entire body away from the creatures. Like, I'm running around the room. Like, it's not going to help, Jem, but I try. But love that though.
I absolutely love that, because sometimes with games you can feel like a bit of a passenger sometimes, especially with like a cinematic game like this, or just really big like AAA titles. You can feel a bit like a passenger, like the game's taking you exactly where you need to go, and you're experiencing these beats exactly how they want you to experience them. But with something like Resident Evil, it just does feel like you're reacting to it and every single moment in a completely different way to somebody else, the way somebody else would. Yeah. So I'm completely with you there with moving your body. I mentioned it when we spoke recently, where when projectiles come flying at me, I'm always like actually ducking.
Yeah. I know. It's like a really over-exaggerated, Mario Kart turning the controller. But this is me, like, literally I was running with my legs, even though I was sat down because I wanted to run faster. Like, my partner's filming me.
Have they got, what's it called? The Oculus thing for this? The 3D?
I don't know.
Support. Yeah. They have support for 7. They haven't said anything about this one. I hope they do, because it really adds a lot to the immersiveness of it.
I think
7 was almost too much in VR.
You played 7 in VR, right, Luke?
I played the first hour, and then I was like, no.
First hour.
There's only so much heart racing your heart can endure.
There were times in Resident Evil 8, I kept having to press pause to like let my heart calm down a bit, because like, this is dangerous.
Jeez.
I'm gonna have a heart attack.
It's actually really good for you though, because you're experiencing like thrills in a safe environment. It's actually like beneficial for your heart.
Really?
Yeah, that's why people like horror films or like scary rides. And if you like them though, like if you're someone who will be scared and then laugh afterwards, then it's actually really good for you.
Okay, good.
If you're someone who is like scared and then having nightmares for the next 2 weeks, avoid. But so as long as you're like you are now, like smiling about it afterwards, it's actually producing a really good chemical effect in the body.
Can I not just make horror gyms then?
Yeah.
Horror gym.
I love it. I think that's like, the more sort of noises that come out of me when I'm playing a game, I think the better the game is. Like at Journey, I remember going, wow, quite a lot. But for this, some of the noises that are coming out of my mouth, like I think it just speaks to how engrossed it sort of makes you.
Glad you specified mouth, because I was wondering.
So noises as well.
It's recommended for everyone, unless you're given to being a nervous wreck, in which case spare yourself.
Or you're a child. I don't condone parents giving and elder people giving children who are way too young to be playing at the game. I'd also chip in as someone who's not a fan of zombie games for the reasons I've expressed. This can be for you if you like fantasy and like more gothic-y settings, because it was for me. And I don't normally like these kinds of games. So, yeah.
Very good. I think all that leaves us with is the rating out of 10. But before we do that as a finale, do you want to learn some more stuff about Romanian folklore?
Yes, please.
Oh, yes.
Yeah!
I felt like I hadn't contributed enough to the episode because I haven't played very much of it. So I was like, well, I can tell you about Romanian folklore. I have made notes, though, because Romanian is not my second language. It's quite tricky. It's not as phonetic as some of the other lovely languages.
So for anyone who hasn't listened to My Turn podcast before, Tim functions as our resident history expert because he loves this stuff, and particularly like
Resident Evil
history and stuff. Yeah, exactly. He's our resident
evil history expert.
Yeah, exactly.
So I thought I'd go through kind of your basic horror monsters first, the witches, vampires, werewolves, etc. So probably one of the most famous characters in Romanian folklore is Mama Pedurage, and she would be very recognizable to you because she's essentially the witch from Hansel and Gretel. She's described as an ugly, mischievous, mad old woman living in the forest. Almost all these stories come out of forests, out of rural areas and forests, understandably, because forests are scary.
Yeah.
She lives in a hut or an old tree, but she is also said to be the protector of animals and plants, and she helps injured animals. She just doesn't like people very much. So she's not entirely evil if you look at it from that perspective. She's sort of a forest protector. And she tries to drive people mad and scare them away to protect the forest. But there are stories about her where there is specifically the Hansel and Gretel story where she gets pushed into an oven by the kid, and they are, trying to find their way through the forest, and they discover a bunch of nut crumbs, which will help them get out of the forest, and that is performed by
an Errington video.
Yeah.
That's performed by the Zana, who are essentially the Romanian equivalent of fairies, or elves, and they vary in size and appearance, but they can also kind of polymorph to extend to blend into their surroundings and camouflage. They appear openly in the woods, and they try to get travelers to follow them to find their way out. And these fairies in the stories are known to give bestow great gifts onto fetuses in utero, so give them the art of dancing and beauty and kindness and luck. Anyone remember Sleeping Beauty? That's what I think that these ones come from, basically, or Sleeping Beauty comes from these stories. So in the folk tales, they are good fairies, but don't cross them, because they also have the power to do bad things and curse you, which is obviously exactly what happens in Sleeping Beauty. So in all the creatures, they have multiple sides to them. They're very shifting. They cross over a number of stories, and they can be good or bad depending on kind of how welcome your presence is or how you treat them. The word Xana actually comes from the Roman goddess Diana, the goddess of the hunt. So you find kind of quite a lot of their words have come from Roman and Greek culture into that as well. Yeah. But obviously mixed with the Slavic languages, it sort of sounds a little bit different. So those are the witches and the good fairies. We've also got multiple versions of vampires. There is no sort of one source for vampire stories or character types, but the two most common are the strigoi, which are troubled spirits that are said to have risen from the grave. They transform into animals. They can become invisible. They gain their vitality by drinking blood of their victims. Mm-hmm. But they are also sometimes known as witches. They are also sometimes flying bird women who suck blood. Mm-hmm. But this word strigoi is present in all the Romance languages, and it always means some kind of sinister blood-sucking woman. Striga itself means scream in Romanian. So there's a lot of kind of common words in different European countries for that. And then similar to the strigoi is the moroi. And the moroi is a type of vampire or ghost in Romanian folklore.
Romanian?
Did I say Romanian?
Yeah.
Romanian folklore. I'm Romanian. So in some versions, they're a phantom of a dead person that leaves their grave to draw the energy from the living. Mm. So if you've seen What We Do in the Shadows, it's a bit like the energy vampire. But also sometimes the moroi are the offspring of strigoi. So it could be two strigoi, or it could be an incubus vampire that has impregnated a woman that would then give birth to a moroi. So they're similar, but they have different stories around them as well.
These are gross too.
Yep. In history, in Northern folklore, people with red hair and grey eyes would have been thought of as vampires, and they would have been hunted and killed.
Oh, Jesus.
In the village, a lot of the houses have like tons of bulbs of garlic hanging from the doors and stuff, which I think it was in Lithuania once, and they had giant bulbs of garlic hanging from under the bridge because they were. Apparently the superstition was vampires used to come down the river, and it was a way to sort of ward them off. I guess they could just get out of the river. But yeah, it's cool. I like those little details thrown into the game.
Yeah.
So there are accounts of suspected vampirism as early as 16th century, kind of around Serbia and so forth. And one of the things listed, amongst all the other stuff like decapitate, put a stake through their heart, turn them so they're face down in their grave, so when they wake up they walk into hell. But there is a garlic thing, but it says put
because they can only go forwards.
Put a clove of garlic under their tongue was the garlic recommendation at that time, which has obviously just evolved to they don't like garlic. But that was that specific one. We've got werewolfy things as well. So the varkalach eats flesh, particularly livers.
Oh, nice.
Rather than drinking blood.
Nice with garlic.
So but they are also sometimes called vampires as well, but etymologically the word is closer to werewolf. It comes from the Greek vakalakos. And the Greeks have a really strong tradition of this actually in their stories. They believed that a person could become a vodkalikos after death due to leading basically a sacrilegious way of life. They could be excommunicated, or if they're buried on unconsecrated ground, or if they eat the meat of a sheep which has been wounded by a wolf or werewolf.
So maybe that's where that comes from, that idea of the bite contamination.
Yes, the bite contamination probably comes from the Greek werewolf stories. They were quite big on it. They also believe that this particular creature would knock on the doors of houses and call the name of the residents. And if it doesn't get a reply the first time, it will pass on without causing any harm. But if someone answers the door, then they'll die a few days later and become another Vodkalikos. And for that reason, there's a superstition in certain Greek villages that you never answer the door until the second knock, just in case it's one of them.
Wow.
Sometimes the Varkalach can be described as being something closer to a goblin, but there's another version which is sort of pure wolfy, which is the Prikolich. It's always wolf-like.
That's a great name as well.
Prikolich.
It's one of those words you might shout at it if it kills all your friends.
Yeah, you Prikolich.
Prikolich.
But what is interesting is, again, they are werewolves. They're like pure werewolves in life, but when they die, they can return as vampires, but they still look like werewolves. So that probably gives rise to the legend of vampires turning into wolves and dogs and owls and bats and anything basically that hunts nocturnally.
Yeah.
They can turn into. So I say with all of those, they kind of switch between different versions of things we might think, like witch vampires, vampire werewolves, werewolf goblins, fairy witches. They move around a lot. And I think another interesting thing maybe to know about, if you want me to carry on, I've got another couple of things.
Yeah, I mean, it's just worth saying that the reason we're talking about this is because a lot of it is clearly borrowed from these Eastern European folklore and fairy stories. And, you know, one of the really wonderful things about this game, certainly for me, was the design and incorporation of these kind of legendary monsters, basically. And like Luke said, I mean, I sort of saw a lot in these little shrines in everyone's house. You see that in a lot of the world, and also Mother Miranda, who is similar to these kind of like flying witches that you've described, is also presented like the Madonna, which is what you call it in like Italian and South America, which is the mother and child, like Mary and the child, in all of the. So it's almost like, it's so intriguing what you're saying, because it's that hybrid between something nasty and something that is protective, and even like the goat shrines and stuff.
Well, exactly. And also, you know, you'll notice there is a hybrid of this sort of rural folk culture and Christianity, because, you know, something like 98% of Romania is Christian, 80% are Orthodox. It's I think the most religious country in Europe, although actually, like, officially it is secular. But you see, like, they just absorb the stories into each other, so you get very sort of witchy, vampiric Christian stories. I've got an interesting example of kind of one of the ways it's blended in. So in folk culture, Romanians believe that the earth is a disc, that it's flat. But
Very patchy.
Yeah, exactly. Except a bit different, because they think that the other side of the disc is like a twisted mirror image of our own. And it's home to creatures called, like the upside down. The beleaguered. The beleaguered, it means kind of gentle or kind-hearted ones, but in typical Romanian style, they can either be really good or really malicious. It's like, how do we know which one we're getting? But they are said to be short, anthropomorphic, and sometimes having the head of a rat. If you see any like rat children, that's where it's come from. They apparently fast throughout the year. And in order to, which is for the benefit of, you know, the humans on the other side. And in order to thank the beleaguered for that on Easter, the Romanian people celebrate it. They call it the Easter of Blazion. And they sort of thank them for living in isolation. And what they do is they eat dyed eggs, and then the shells they put in the river and they let them flow downstream, because rivers go out to like the great world sea. And that's where all the spirits flow when they're going to the afterlife. So they feel like it's kind of an offering and a thank you to these creatures that sort of live between life and death. But even that, what they think is the souls go through the river, they circle 3 times around the world ocean before they descend into the afterlife. There are other kind of folklores that say the Blazion are also just, unbaptized children who passed into the afterlife. They call this water the holy water of Saturday, and even now, Romanians will use the phrase "it's gone on Saturday's water," which means it is going to waste.
Oh.
Yeah, and if they ever drink from a stream, they cross themselves first to make sure they're not drinking the soul of someone that has gone into the river that is on the way to the afterlife.
So hearing all of this and like thinking about the village, because I didn't look at any of these things before, you've just shared them now. I'm like, they totally did their research on this and drew from that. Like that, even why is there a river going through the middle of the village?
Pathway into the afterlife.
Yeah.
I've got a closing fact which isn't necessarily about Romanian culture.
Okay.
But I can do it very quickly. It's just that in order to encourage people to take up the vaccine, Bran Castle, which is the traditional kind of tourist home of Dracula, was opened up as a vaccine centre. People could just turn up unbooked in May for free, and you get a little sticker with fangs on it.
Interesting.
Because you got pricked.
Because you got pricked. They said the idea was to show how people got jabbed 500 to 600 years ago in Europe.
That's amazing.
There you go.
Well, that brings it very well done, Tim. That was yes. I mean, I feel like
amazing.
That's made me just look at the game in another way again. I could tell that they'd drawn from some stuff that I'd kind of got a vague knowledge of.
I just think it's great with the Resident Evil games how they can draw from all of these different cultures and different things and kind of just explain it in the same way, which is that it's just because it's bioweapons, which kind of feels like always sometimes it doesn't make sense. Why are there vampires and werewolves in there? It's like bioweapons.
It's always a bioweapon. We learned that from watching Doom the other day. It's always a bioweapon.
Always a bioweapon, yeah.
So I think that brings us nicely to our ratings of the game. So I'll go for... All right, Luke, you go first. What's your out of 10?
Well, I've not finished it yet.
Okay. That's your caveat.
I will say that right now, I'm absolutely loving it. Like, I think it's not perfect, but it is so much fun and so engrossing, and the silliness has won me over quite a bit. They put enough of the scariest stuff that I kind of prefer in there to win me over. I mean, I'm sitting like a high 8, like a high or a low 9 at the minute, but we'll see. The ending might crap the bed, so we'll see.
And for you, Ben?
There it goes.
Yeah, so I do want to play it again. I do want to play it through from start to finish again, just to fully settle on a score. But at the moment, it's close. It's close to being perfect. I'd put a 9.5 there because you always have these fears. You always have these fears going into a game, especially a release from your favorite game franchise, where you're just like, please be good. And it's almost like, please be good, but also please be amazing, please be scary. And it kind of has lived up to all of those expectations. And even though there are sort of minor disappointments with certain things, it's almost like you can overlook them based on the fact that we've got so much as we have. So yeah, I'm gonna play it through again. But at the moment, I feel like it's a 9.5. It's one of those games that I couldn't stop thinking about it when I was playing it through. Even now, I'm sort of going back and gonna do a lot of the challenges and find a lot of the treasures and stuff. So I feel like it's got a replayability. Is
it your favorite? Or how does it sit in your favorite? I
don't know if it's my favorite, because this is the thing. They are all so different, and I like them for different reasons. So like, sure, I love this world and it's amazing, but at the same time, nothing beats Raccoon City for me. Nothing beats like exploring Raccoon City, because it's like a nostalgic thing as well, especially with the remakes 2 and 3.
Yeah,
it's 2 of your favorite games ever to be remade so well, in terms of like the modern aesthetics and everything. Yeah.
And you guys actually on the Horror Hangout did a whole episode where you chatted through like the Resident Evil games and some other. I think it was Doom as well, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was specifically horror
check
in
that
video
out
games.
if you want to hear one.
I was like, did we?
Yeah, I listened to it. You did a whole
We
video
did.
game special, which was basically Resident Evil and Doom, I think.
Yeah.
I was waiting for all these other horror games. It was just like 3 games.
I think Outlast must have been in there. Soma, maybe.
Soma.
I don't remember. I literally remember like 3 big franchises, but mate, I don't know.
Yeah.
It was a while ago that I listened to that.
We'll have to do a follow-up and discuss more horror games. On that.
More horror games, because there's lots that I've played that are just really different to this that I do enjoy. So for me, for sure. For me, like as someone who's not really played these games before, I'd rate this quite high as well. The things that Ben's touching on, which I won't spoil, did let it down a bit in terms of story and stuff later on. But so I'd probably give it an 8.5. So I think it's like a really good game. Yeah.
Amazing.
So I think that's it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So all we've got to say to you guys is don't piss off any demons when you go walking in the forest.
Yeah,
Try
I
my
mean,
very
Take care.
don't actively try and piss a demon off.
Well, don't accept gifts and then take a cog off a horse's face. I think that's the main thing we learn in the opening scene of the.
Never
Yeah.
look a cog horse in the bum. Whatever you did, I really
Famous
don't know what you're
phrase.
talking about.
So, just really quickly before we wrap up, where can we find Horror Hangout?
On all of your favorite podcast apps, just search Horror Hangout. I think we're the only one. There might be another one. I'm not too sure. Or just go to Twitter or wherever, search for Hawk and Cleaver, which is our kind of production, our story studio name. So you find our other podcasts as well. Follow me on Twitter at Lukov Kondor, Kondor with a K, and Ben at Ben _. Sorry, you go.
I'm Ben _Errington on pretty much everything. You'll be able to find me.
Wicked. And we'll link to all your things in our show notes as well, just in case that was too quick for you or you couldn't be bothered to write it down. Thank you so much, Ben and Luke, for joining us. And it's been an absolute pleasure. And also check us out on Horror Hangout as well. We had a very, very funny conversation about it, which I highly recommend. It was really fun. And thank you for listening. If you haven't already done it, please subscribe. We are also on all the places where you get podcasts. And please, what really helps is if you do listen on Apple Podcasts, give us a 5-star review. It just really helps get us up those charts, which is really important for independent podcasts. Do the same for Horror Hangout too, please. And also what we're really looking for as we move into it being non-lockdown is you recommending stuff to us that we can play with other people in real life. So any good, we're London based, so any good street games, any good event games, board games, things that we've been missing out because we've been all digital because it's been locked down.
We're just so bored of playing with ourselves.
Really?
Let's play with someone else now.
And on that note, we'll see you next time. Bye.
Bye.
You're gross.